Something about this whole situation felt off from the very beginning, and if you've been paying attention, you probably felt it too. Let me ask you this right away: why would Pam Bondi, someone who consistently did Donald Trump's bidding, especially when it came to sensitive issues like the Epstein saga, suddenly become the foreperson? Why would the person protecting the administration take the blame, and then get fired? Does that make sense, or does it feel staged? Because what we learned next completely changes how you look at this story. And right here.
The Epstein Files, you'd agree, not handled well? And I don't, first of all, I have never heard President Trump say that the Attorney General that anything that happened to her had anything to do with the Epstein Files. And so look, the Epstein Files has been a saga that's lasted for the past year. And what happened when the President signed the Transparency Act is the Department of Justice has now released all the files with respect to the Epstein saga. And the Attorney General Bondi and I appeared in front of Congress voluntarily a couple weeks ago to answer any questions they had. We have made every single congressman, senator available to come and see any document, redacted, unredacted, that they want. And so I think that to the extent that the Epstein Files was a part of the past year of this Justice Department, should not be a part of anything going forward.
That moment, that announcement, that shift, Todd Blanch stepping in as acting Attorney General, tells you everything you need to know. Because suddenly, we are told the slate is clean. Just like that. All concerns about the DOJ suppressing Epstein files. Gone? Finished? Over? Really? Let me ask you, do scandals just disappear because one person leaves? Because what this looks like is the most obvious bait and switch. The narrative being pushed is simple: Pam Bondi was the problem. She's gone. Therefore, the problem is gone. Case closed. But here's the reality they don't want you to focus on. The Department of Justice has not released all Epstein-related files. Not even close. We are talking about 3 million files still hidden, out of 6 million total. Think about that. Half the evidence, still missing. So how can anyone, especially the acting Attorney General, stand there and claim compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act? A law that clearly mandates full disclosure. How do you explain that? You can't. And that's when it becomes painfully clear what this move was really about. It wasn't about transparency. It was about shifting blame. It was about loading all the Epstein baggage onto Pam Bondi, and then removing her so the administration could pretend the issue disappeared with her. But here's the problem. People aren't buying it. Because now, new information is surfacing that suggests something much bigger is going on. Something that doesn't stop at Bondi. Something that goes all the way to the top. To the president himself. And this is where things get explosive. Because reports indicate that Donald Trump appears 38,000 times in Epstein-related records. 38,000. Let that sink in. That's not casual association. That's not coincidence. That's deep involvement, or at the very least, deep connection. And the allegation goes even further. That law enforcement agencies may have been used not to expose the truth, but to protect it. To cover it up. So let me ask you directly. If that's even partially true, what does that say about the system? Because now the strategy becomes clear. Remove Bondi. Reset the narrative. Hope the pressure disappears. But here's where that plan starts to fall apart. Because there was one thing they couldn't erase. A sworn deposition. Scheduled for April 14th. And the assumption seemed obvious: fire her, and maybe she doesn't have to testify. But that's not how this works. When this exact question was asked to Oversight Committee Ranking Member Robert Garcia, whether her subpoena still stands, his answer changed everything. And right here.
The question remains, though, that given the fact that she's out of her position now, will the subpoena compelling her to come testify for a closed-door deposition with the House Oversight Committee still apply for April 14th?
It does apply. First, the subpoena we put in place does not have any mention of whether the fact, she's AG or not. And the subpoena is for Pam Bondi. And so whether she is in the position or not, she legally is required to appear before the Oversight Committee on April the 14th, which is the date that Comer set for her to come. We've checked this already out today with all the lawyers and the attorneys. And so she now has to come testify. She can come and do the right thing and finally be honest about actually what happened, why the cover-up, why 50% of the files have not been released. And look, She no longer has to work for Donald Trump.
So the oversight Republicans released a statement saying, quote, since Pam Bondi is no longer Attorney General, Chairman Comer will speak with Republican members and the Department of Justice about the status of the deposition subpoena and confer on next steps. Does that sound to you like James Comer and oversight Republicans are looking for an out?
Well, what it didn't sound like to me was saying that she didn't have to come testify. I think that James Comer knows that the only way to reverse that subpoena is to come in front of the committee again and force a vote for us to actually remove the subpoena. And I think there's enough Republicans there that likely will keep their courage, like they did last time, and actually ensure the subpoena actually moves forward. And so Comer cannot somehow retract the subpoena on his own, or even with him and Republicans, because he was voted by the entire committee and done in a way that was bipartisan. And so she must come in to testify unless he tries to pull some type of major vote in the committee, and I'm not sure that all Republicans would go along with that.
The subpoena still stands, even after being fired, meaning she is still required to testify. And it doesn't stop there, because Republicans on the committee are also demanding her appearance. Yes, even across party lines. And when Nancy Mace weighed in on this situation, it became even clearer that this isn't going away.
Committee spokesperson, Congresswoman, had told CNN just last night that the chairman, the plan after the news, was that the chairman was going to speak with members about the status of the deposition subpoena and confer on next steps. Have you talked to the chairman yet about those next steps?
I have not yet, but I made my point very clear yesterday when I issued the subpoena that was voted on by the Oversight Committee a number of weeks ago. We did it by name and not by the title of the Attorney General. So she's still compelled and required by law to come before the Oversight Committee. And at this juncture, I'm not backing away from that or backing down from that. I do believe the handling of the Epstein Files was done in a very poor manner by her and her office. And there are still questions that she has answers to that are very serious and has information I believe that'll be important to the committee. So I'm moving forward. If I could still have the majority of support from the committee, it won't be just me. I have to have the support of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to move forward if the chairman wants to try to quash it.
So now think about the situation. Trump isn't just out his attorney general. He's also failed to stop her from testifying under oath. Which raises a huge question. What happens if she does testify? What might she reveal? And maybe even more importantly, what happens if she refuses? Because that opens the door to serious legal consequences. We are not talking about politics anymore. We are talking about legal liability. And this is where things escalate quickly. Because refusing a subpoena isn't just risky, it can be damaging in ways that are very hard to contain.
In terms of accountability for Pam Bondi, if indeed she does refuse to comply with this lawful subpoena, can you talk about the statute of limitations? Even though, during this administration, obviously there's nobody at the DOJ who would seek to hold her accountable, but what could it look like in subsequent administrations?
Right. Well, look, all subpoenas are essentially active within that Congress, within that period of time. And so, right now, obviously, we're here till through the end of the year. She has to comply, and we would move to hold her in contempt immediately if she didn't comply with the subpoena. And certainly, as a private citizen, she doesn't have the Department of Justice or the president able to play games as it relates to her and her scheduling. I think she's going to be quite available here in the next couple of weeks. In addition, our plan, and certainly mine, we're going to win the Congress. And we're going to win back the House. And if she thinks she's going to try to evade or distract, it's just not possible. It's better for her to get out in front of this now, give us the truth, and tell us why they've docked survivors' names, why the cover-up, why has Donald Trump's name been removed, put back, and then removed from the files, why the president say this was a hoax and try to shut down the investigation. So there's a lot of questions to ask, and I think we're going to be hearing from her in the weeks ahead.
You had mentioned that the subpoena is valid for this Congress, but would defying a congressional subpoena, would that crime only be valid during this Congress, or is that something that could be prosecuted even after this Congress is over?
Well, we can take that to court and prosecute as long as necessary. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what's ironic here, and the Attorney General knows this. I mean, she's going to be in front of us, whether it's now or in the future, because on day one of a Democratic controlled Congress, I'll be sending out the subpoena to have Pam Bondi in. So there's not going to be a need for there to be any sort of limitations on that subpoena, because she either comes in now or she comes in when I chair the committee. And so I think that's going to be the important thing. I think she knows that. She is the AG, so she's going to understand that.
So now the situation flips. What was supposed to reduce pressure has actually increased it. What was supposed to bury the story has amplified it. And what was supposed to protect the administration may now expose it even further. Because here's something important. This isn't just about Pam Bondi anymore. It's about the system. It's about accountability. And it's about whether power can be used to avoid consequences. And there's another key shift happening here. For years, there was this belief, especially among Democrats, that playing fair, acting in good faith, and respecting institutions would lead to justice. But that belief is changing. Because what we are seeing now is a realization. Goodwill alone doesn't work. Not in situations like this. And that's why we are starting to see a more aggressive approach. More pressure. More enforcement. More willingness to push back. And this moment might be the turning point. So now we are at a crossroads. If Pam Bondi testifies, this story explodes. If she refuses, that creates another scandal. Either way, this doesn't go away. And that's the key takeaway. Because what we are witnessing isn't the end of a scandal. It's the beginning of a much bigger one. So let me ask you. Was this a smart move to control the narrative? Or a massive miscalculation that made things worse? Because history shows us something very clear. The more you try to control the truth, the harder it pushes back. That's the pendulum of justice. And right now, it feels like it's starting to swing. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this was a calculated cover-up, or a strategy that completely backfired? I want to hear your opinion. And if you know someone who needs to understand what's really happening behind the headlines, share this video with them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.